Is it possible that Kate, with her medical background, might have wanted to help Madeleine to go to sleep that night?
There's no doubt that any new development with regard to the Madeleine McCann
I got nightmares in my head. I feel
70,000
thoughts build up until I can't. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head. I feel the thoughts build up until
Hello and a warm welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In the Madeleine McCann case, we all tend to spend far too much time disproving ridiculous scenarios and far too little presenting a synthesis of if X didn't happen, what did happen. So let's do a thought experiment. We have two scenarios essentially, an abduction and something else. Let's spend a little thought energy and effort into the something else bit for once. What do you say? So what we're going to do is apply this thought experiment in just two areas of the Madeleine McCann case and then see what comes out of that. And the first area is, did the saturation media coverage work? What do you think? What's your answer to that? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, next week on February 16, Christian Bruckner, the quote-unquote prime suspect, certainly in the mainstream media version of it, goes on trial in Germany. What do you think is going to come of that? Again, think about the question in that context. Did the saturation media coverage work? If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button. And let's get started. Did you know the McCann set up a fund on May 15, 2007? That's less than 2 weeks after Madeleine disappeared.
But running a campaign on this scale is expensive. 12 days after Madeleine's disappearance, the McCanns launched a fundraising campaign. The fund's website had 58 million hits within just 2 days of launch, and the cash started to pour in.
The fund's website had scored 125 million hits, raising more than £1 million before the end of the first week. Effectively, the McCann's website became the world record breaker in going from 0 to 100 million hits in the fastest time. How did it happen? By accident or by design? And the McCanns sought every possible opportunity to have sort of a media event. It's now 50 days since Madeleine's gone missing. It's now 100 days. And then they would have balloons of certain colors going into the air. And you might clap your hands and say, the job of getting this story out there was achieved. Well done, well done. But you might want to put those clapping hands in your pockets when you ask whether this strategy of using the media instead of the police to solve a case, whether it actually worked. Has it worked?
I think it's obvious that the media was far more interested in circulation and viewership than the fate of this poor little girl.
We saw a similar strategy in the Ramsey case, this whole idea of courting the media. Well, did it work? Did it work in the JonBenet Ramsey case? Does it work to have a counter-narrative in the media where suspects or former suspects repeatedly criticize the official police investigation? In both the McCann and Ramsey cases, this happened. Did it work? Well, one must begin by asking the ridiculously obvious question.
Your question depends on me understanding what you hope to achieve.
Well, what was it supposed to achieve? And I suppose you could ask that question in a multifaceted way. You shouldn't have to, but in this case, I suppose we do. And the one question is, a little girl has gone missing. What are you trying to do? Well, you are trying to find that little girl. In another way, you're trying to find justice. You're trying to, if somebody did something, you're trying to catch the person. On the other hand, if someone is doing something in a nefarious way, is it meant to put up barriers and walls and obfuscate? Is something darker taking place? what is supposedly being achieved through turning to the media. And as we heard someone saying, the media aren't really trying to solve the case. In fact, it suits them if the case keeps rolling around endlessly.
I just wanted to ask you, you've chosen to do the interviews now, 3.5 years on. People will be wondering how on earth you keep going and how you keep this story in the news after such a long time.
Well, we don't, although we offer to do things like this, really I think it's a reflection that the public are very interested. And
I think the public care about Madeleine, and that's why it's still a story, for want of a better word.
Now, it is quite an interesting question, especially in the context of the McCanns saying they didn't really want to go back to do a reenactment because they would be then at the mercy of the world's media. And nevertheless, you have this other side where they are actively participating with the media, and then at the end of it, the question sort of comes up, how did this happen? Oh, no, the public really care about Madeleine. And although I'm sure that's true, I think it's a little naive to suggest that that just happened kind of accidentally, that the public were interested and then the media caught up. I think it's the other way around. The media were interested, and obviously the public, it resonated with the public, and still does. But then the question is, how is it being treated by the media today? We have Christian Bruckner as the quote-unquote prime suspect, and now he's going on trial for a charge that is totally unrelated to Madeleine McCann. So again, the question arises, did the media saturation strategy work? And I guess you can ask it from two different perspectives. Well, did it work for Madeleine? And also, did it work for the McCanns? Broadly speaking, one might say the media strategy was supposed to catch the killer, right? And broadly speaking, we can say 17 years later in the McCann case, 27 years later in the Ramsey case, well, the killers haven't been caught. Did you know in the Ramsey case there were two crucial witnesses, a couple who lived across the road, who heard a child scream, and also they heard a metal object clanking against a hard surface. The Stantons, when they realized the size of the media shitstorm, they didn't want to participate any further in the investigation. Do you think that helped or hindered the Ramseys? Do you think that helped or hindered the Boulder police and the prosecution? Let me ask the obvious question again. Do you think the strategy of a maximum deafening level media clamoring media circus was supposed to help the investigation or hinder it? Think again, and I've mentioned it this so many times already. Think about Dr. Julian Totman, who tried for years to explain above this cacophony that he was Tannerman. An article in The Sun notes, without a hint of irony, that Totman's claims fell on deaf ears. Well, a media clamor tends to do that. It drowns everything else out. And it did in the case of fake Tannerman versus the real Totman. In the McCann case, there are also other important witnesses, similar to the Stantons of the Ramsey case, which seem to withdraw from the white-hot glare of the media spotlight. Any idea who I'm referring to? I mean, who would you say would be the star witnesses if this case went to trial? Who would you say would be the star witnesses, or should have been, or could have been the star witnesses in this case? And how often do you ever hear from them? Do you see them in documentaries? Do you see them interviewed? Do you know these other witnesses were approached by private detectives working for the McCanns? Now, we can talk about the power of the media and things like controlling the narrative and changing the narrative and influencing the narrative. And we all know that what that means in theory. But what does it mean in practice? Well, according to Village magazine, quote, Irish officers found an Irish witness credible. A local Garda, and that's the Irish police, who interviewed him on behalf of the Portuguese authorities, described this witness as genuine. A decent man who did not want to court the press or seek publicity. Now, do you think this posture of not wanting to court the press, do you think that this played into the strategy of those who did want to? In any event, going back to the article, while the Irish witnesses evidence seemed compelling, independent, and without motivation, much to his frustration, it was not given the attention it seemed to deserve. And so the media basically directed the public's attention in this direction or that direction, and you kind of had the sense that that law enforcement would sort of follow the cue, follow the lead of wherever the media was focusing. Now, almost a year after he made his initial statement to police, he was approached by private detectives working for the McCanns, and he was actually asked to make EFITs, that's electronic facial identification images, of the man that he had seen the night Madeleine disappeared. And meanwhile, the sketch that Jane Tanner had made had gone around the world, 540 times, and everyone was talking about that. And so these EFITs came into the game quite late, and so by the time it did, nobody really cared. That is the legacy of this saturation media. According to Village magazine, the McCanns say they gave these pictures to the police at the time, but chose not to publicize them. The article is a little bit cryptic there. Who chose not to publicize them? Did the police choose not to do it? Did the McCanns choose not to do it, or did both choose not to do it? Instead, they remained focused, according to the article, on another sighting by their friend Jane Tanner, one of the so-called Tapa 7. And so, that was because the media had made such a big deal of this. And this is what the public were chattering about and interested in. So you can decide for yourself whether this was an exclusion from the media by accident or by design, but you can also see how a peripheral clue became the mainstream narrative, and then also how what ought to have been the main thrust of the investigation became peripheral. Of course, it helped that the original witness did not want to court the press or seek publicity, whereas Jane Tanner did. And you would even see the McCanns going to, certainly Jerry, going to Praia da Luz and participating in a reenactment with Jane Tanner in order to keep that publicity train running. Of course, did this other witness do the same thing under the same circumstances? So this is quite a big topic. I'm not going to take it further than that in this analysis. But I do want to say that when you're in a position in a criminal case where you can hold court with the world's media, as Amanda Knox could and did, then you really do have the power to change the narrative and to control the narrative. In simple terms, you are able to exert power. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.